Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We appreciate your being here for this session. I'm delighted I have the opportunity to present with this dynamic presentation team, all of whom model exemplary leadership behaviors, and particular leadership team behaviors. Our session today is really broken into two parts. First, we're going to spend time on building a strong collaborative leadership team. And as Robin mentioned in her introductory remarks, we consider, when we say those words, we're considering the presiding judge or chief judge of your court combined with the court administrator or court clerk, the highest administrative person in your court. Our premise is first you have to build a strong collaborative leadership team among the two of you, and then you can extend collaborative efforts to your partners and stakeholders. So 2 parts today. It'll be very interactive. We will take questions as we go, although we reserve the right to hold that question and perhaps have a conversation with you after the session if needed. So Robin's going to run around with the mic as needed. All right, 2 parts. So these are our learning objectives. We have a case study and whatnot that we're going to refer you to, have you discuss. We have a couple of tools and resources. Our hope is that you're going to leave with a couple of things. If nothing else, kind of reminders and refreshers of what it takes to be a strong leadership team and how to elevate your communication, collaboration, and cooperation with your partners to the point of true collaboration, and we're going to make a distinction on that. Secondly, so not only will you leave, we hope, with tips and strategies, we're going to leave you with tools as well. Want to emphasize that the content for today really cuts across several of NACM's core competencies. So you'll see some of our content in the leadership competencies, some in the strategic planning, some in court governance. So I refer you to the website for more information on each of the competencies that we're going to touch upon while focusing on collaborative leadership.
Thank you, Brenda. So she has a slide up here, a group from Michigan. This is a group that participated in MJI's 6-month Court Leadership Team Academy, which I want to acknowledge the State Justice Institute funded. We submitted a proposal and they awarded us a grant to try. MJI offers court management and chief judge training. We usually do it as a team. The most we've ever done is a 3-day program. This was a 6-month journey that offered court leadership teams the opportunity to either establish knowledge and skills or enhance them through face-to-face seminars, 2, a series of webinars, 2, and then some technical assistance, either on the phone or face-to-face. We just wrapped that up, and because of that program, we were able to take an excerpt and provide it to you today. So we hope you find it as useful as that smiling group right there.
Thanks, Dawn. Okay, without further ado, since we only have 60 minutes, we're going to jump right into the content. So we know all of you here are steeped in what is management, what is leadership. I mean, NACM as an organization really promotes learning about both of those. But we want to build a common foundation for folks who are in the room as well as those who are participating through the live streaming. We know that court executive teams, whether you're the presiding judge or the court administrator or court clerk, you wear multiple hats. You put on your management hat sometimes, and sometimes you will put on a leadership hat, and then sometimes you're a judge in the courtroom, sometimes you might be the jury commissioner, some court administrators may be referees. So the bottom line is you wear multiple hats and you're putting them on and off all the time. When it comes to being a leader, what we know from the 30-plus years of research on leadership and managing, leader behaviors and manager behaviors, is leaders are people who have a vision, they're inspirational, they challenge people to achieve extraordinary results. They elevate our performance to achieve things that perhaps we didn't think we could achieve. Managers, on the other hand, are people who do the day-to-day operations. They manage and oversee operations, they improve processes, they plan, they control in a good way, they organize, all the things needed to have a really well-oiled operations. So my point here in kind of laying this foundation is the members of the executive team have multiple hats, two of which are leader and manager. And my question to you as an executive team is, do you, as an executive leadership team, overmanage and underlead your court, which there's some authors out in the world that write and think that organizations generally are overmanaged and underled. So do you switch back and forth, or are you able both individually and as a team to shift effortlessly between those two hats? And we're going to share some tips with you perhaps as we go through our program on how you lead and manage almost somewhat interchangeably, but we know the behaviors that people do are different when you wear those distinct hats. Another point we want to make as we lay this foundation is both members of the executive leadership team have position power. You have the title of chief judge, presiding judge, or court administrator. That is your formal position power. Position power comes from the position which you hold, or you are elected to, or you are appointed to. Personal power comes from how you behave and interact as a person. So as you think about what behaviors you engage in, I ask you, do you overuse, do you individually or you as an executive team overuse your position power? You know, it's because I'm the chief judge or because I'm the court administrator. Or do you use an effective balance of personal and position power at the right time? The research on this is showing that in today's environment, dynamic, changing world, personal power is going to get you further ahead than if you use exclusively position power. So I challenge you, position power is important, to use it at strategic and key opportune times, but I challenge you both individually and as a leadership team to take a look at the manner in which you use your personal power in your respective positions. Lastly, here are some challenges that executive teams frequently have. So teams at the top, I'm going to restate. Teams at the top, people who are the top leaders in organizations, have different challenges than divisional teams or work groups or IT teams or sales teams. And here are a few that have been noted. So I want to share these with you, and before we then go on to the next piece, I'm curious if you have others that we want to add to this. So clear roles and responsibilities. In essence, you're sharing, the chief judge and court administrator are sharing a lot of roles and responsibilities. So how do you avoid role confusion or role conflict? Similarly, are you able to shift in and out of these various roles at appropriate times? Do you demonstrate mutual trust and respect? Do you have each other's back? And more importantly, do you demonstrate that you have each other's back? Can people see that in what you do and say? Establishing and maintaining long-range goals and strategic priorities. Sometimes we get distracted by the next shiny new object. And how do you maintain focus? And can an executive team maintain that focus and perseverance and diligence on whatever they set as priorities? And then this last is achieving and maintaining openness. You know, can you have the tough conversations needed to address problems that bubble up or opportunities that you're facing? And can you engage in straight talk? You can be truthful and say exactly what it is that you need to say, even though maybe the other person doesn't want to hear it. So before we go on, what other leadership challenges come to mind that you experience in your respective roles? Leadership challenges between chief judge and court administrator. Yes, here we go. Thanks. Here we have a, yep.
We're live streaming, so please use the microphone.
Yep.
Sometimes when you interact with multiple agencies, things are approved without working out all the details on how things are going to actually get enacted.
Excellent point. Okay, so approval, making a decision without maybe understanding all the ramifications. Very good. Another leadership challenge. There's one right behind you. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. I would say executing the strategy.
Oh,
Oftentimes the judge is used to ruling and saying what needs to happen. And as the administrator, of course, there's a lot of massaging and different components that have to work together. And so, yeah, that's executing the strategy.
excellent. Those are two great ones. How about one more that comes to mind? Anybody have another one? Kevin.
Something that's a little different than the private sector. In the court world, we also have to be dependent or interdependent with other branches of government. So even though we may have a great plan and we may know exactly where we want to go to execute that strategy, there may not be the money or the political will to do it.
Excellent. These are great. And I know we could probably go on, but in the interest of time, those are great. We'll add those to our list. So Dawn is going to take up the next part here.
Thank you, Brenda. Good morning. So we just heard that teams at the top have several struggles, but one of the key is communication, making sure you get it right. It's an essential skill, and what we thought we would do is take a moment to consider some of the strategies that teams at the top use that have ensured they're successful. Can you go to the next?
I did.
Okay.
You want this?
So we have a set of strategies, if you will, that are listed here. And I don't know if any of you had a chance ahead of time to take a look at the statements that are here and consider where your team falls. If you take a look at the first one, we communicate and inspire others to achieve common goals. You know that if there isn't anyone following you, it's going to be awfully lonesome to lead. But one of the first things you have to do is sort of explain why people would want to follow you. And when you communicate that, it has to be strategic messaging. I think that you could say, I want to go to Home Depot, and those of you that get excited by nails and siding would follow. If you say, I want to go and explore a way to look at making our kitchen more efficient, I'm with you. I'm going. I want to know. If you say you want a new case management system, some of you get excited by that. Maybe not your funding unit, but there's others, right? If you say, I want to explore a system that's going to help us become more efficient, be able to communicate, share information, you have people start to lean in and learn a little bit more about that. So the way you convey what your goal will help make sure the people that you need to be following you are with you. We speak candidly and openly with others. A really critical practice. In the last section, Brenda mentioned teams at the top need to establish openness. This is, in fact, really a critical component. Openness builds trust. If individuals are uncertain the ramifications of sharing sometimes hard information you may not want or like to hear, they won't. So you'll have sort of a harmony, but you won't really get much accomplished because the real issues won't be addressed. When you do have differences, if people feel comfortable and there's trust, they're willing to be there for the conflict which is going to happen. And that you have to work through, you have to have a willingness to work through that. Because again, once you have trust, you have a healthy conflict, you've got a commitment. People understand where they stand and where you're going. There's more in this discussion of openness and trust in Patrick Lencioni's book on the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. I highly recommend that book if you are interested in looking at a team and how you work through the essential elements. The third one, we build on others' ideas during discussions. When we create an environment where people are comfortable sharing their concerns and their ideas, the time is well spent. Most innovations come from those that are close to the work. So while you may be able to come up with some really good ideas, they're even better when you've got others with different perspectives and different ideas that will strengthen, make it the best going forward. We listen and we incorporate diverse perspectives into decision making. Exemplary leaders look around. They look for the best ideas everywhere. And the only way that you can gain that kind of information is to have others at the table, not just your core court people. That may make it easy. When you're working with 3, you've got to make a few extra steps when it's people not in your building, in different agencies. But when you actually have that collaboration, the decision making, the ideas are that much stronger. Lastly, we recognize others' contributions. Along the way, there's small successes. There's small contributions by others. And when you stop and acknowledge those, that sends a message that you are looking out, you recognize, you value those contributions. Those small things, those small gestures, an email, a thank you, those are really critical. And I think I've talked about what's essential as far as communication. I've talked about taking a look at strengths. As you look at this and consider where you're at, this is perhaps a chance for you, if your team members aren't here, to take this tool, go back and have a conversation. Blame it on the National Center. They gave us this tool. I was just wondering if we wanted to check in and see where we're at. But then the next part, now what? We're going to hear from one of our court management teams and Brenda on ways to enhance our knowledge and our skills to enhance our relationships both within our team but also with those stakeholders we have to work with. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. So this is one tool. Takeaway, if you haven't had this sort of a conversation with your presiding judge or court administrator, it's a great tool to just open the dialogue. That's all it will do, is open dialogue. All right, we are going to now hear from Chief Judge Colombo and Zanelle Brown on some tips for enhancing collaboration. And please take it away.
So back in 2013, when the Michigan Supreme Court appointed me the Chief Judge, we were losing our court administrator. And I remember kind of staring in the mirror one morning thinking, what did I get myself into? I had to get a new court administrator, and I had to lead the court. And although I'd had some leadership positions in the court, being the chief judge is totally different from anything I had ever done before. So I was fortunate to have Zanelle Brown, who was our friend of the court, and that's kind of a unique position in Michigan. We have an agency within the court that collects child support, and Zanelle had been a very successful friend of the court. And after an interviewing process, I hired her as our court administrator. One of the things that we had to both work through was, how do we define our responsibilities? And what we did in the beginning is we worked together and talked about the issues. And it became very clear to us as we proceeded along that the responsibilities fell pretty clearly on one side or the other. Managing the court was the court administrator's responsibility and function. I had to learn that. And I learned it by watching what was happening and being involved in the decisions. Dealing with the judges and managing their issues became my responsibility. So it was by working together, talking these issues out, and meeting all the time that we were able to address these issues and I think come up with a fairly good management team. The next thing that was important was the chief judge to become supportive of the court administrator. And as an administrator, how do you get the chief judge or presiding judge to do that? Well, one of the things Zanelle is very big on is meeting with our executive team together monthly, where we're reporting what's going on in the court so everyone knows, but also monthly meetings with each of the managers. And it was important for me to make as many of those meetings as I can, just to be supportive, to be able to give my input where it was necessary, and to know what was going on in terms of my management team at the court. And that was really helpful. But one of the things that happened in that first year, we were going to lose 4 judges. And at the time we had 62 judges, we were going to go down to 58 judges, and the question became, where are we going to take those judges from? And I wanted to take 1 judge from each division. But I didn't have much support from my presiding judges on that issue. And I had a study done by our state court administrative office, which told me how many judges should be in each division. And it was suggesting that I should take out more judges out of my criminal division than I really wanted to do, because I have jail overcrowding problems, and I didn't want that to get worse. In any event, Zanelle came up with an idea that was able to placate my presiding judges. She found some money that allowed me to hire an extra friend of the court referee, which took some of the work off our domestic relations judges, and some money to hire a couple of attorneys in our general counsel's office, which would help the civil division. And by her ideas, I was able to persuade our presiding judges to accept in each division loss of 1 judge. You have to maintain open communication. I'm very big on responding to all my emails before I leave. I look at my emails all the time. I return calls to my staff. We communicate all the time, and if I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Even if I tell them I've studied this problem and I can't do this, I make certain that I get back and work with who's ever calling me in terms of the staff or needs something. Developing an objective hiring process is so important, and you need to make certain your chief judge understands that. Generally, the chief judge needs to be taken out of the process. And most chief judges, if they're smart, want to be taken out of the process, other than the most important hirings like your general counsel, your chief financial officer, your court administrator. I know that I get a lot of phone calls and requests for hiring decisions. And because I'm out of the process, I can refer people to our website, our court website, to take a look at job postings and things like that. And it also insulates me from nepotism issues and those kinds of things when they may arise. So that's a very important part of making certain your chief judge understands that it's important that he not get involved. One of the things that happened to me early on is one of our judges was retiring, and his law clerk needed a position. And it ended up that she found a position with another judge, and then took a leave of absence, and then got terminated during that period of time, and a lawsuit resulted. And I was really sorry that I was even involved at all in trying to help her get a position. And I learned from that experience too that, hey, just stay away from that and let your HR department deal with those types of issues. Stay organized and plan ahead. One of the things that really concerned me when I was going to take over, since we were losing both our court administrator and the administrative assistant to the court administrator, of all the things that happened during the year and all the reports that have to be filed. And the administrative assistant to the court reporter left a little calendar of things. And Zanelle then took that calendar and developed it into a complete calendar. And if you take one thing from this program today, take a look at doing something like we've done, because it shows month by month everything that happens that has to happen. It's a wonderful blueprint for managing the court. And the last thing is try to get your judge to develop a strategic plan. And the way you do that is you explain that you can get a lot of support by doing that. And you do that by, first of all, hiring someone who can lead you through the process. And secondly, involving everyone in the court and your stakeholders. And we did it by first meeting with the person who took us through this process and identifying everything about our court. And then we had surveys that we developed for use within the court and also with all of our stakeholders. And we sent those out and we got pretty good responses. We had focus groups also who were surveyed and answered the responses. And then we had people volunteer from the court. And we would have regular meetings over a year and identify what our needs were and where we needed to go. And after a year, we came up with a fantastic strategic plan. And what's good about it is because there's so much input from everyone else, there's a lot of confidence in the strategic plan in identifying what is important for the court to do. And it lays out a blueprint in the event that the chief judge or the court administrator leaves. The plan stays the same. And then what you do is you put together one-year plans to implement parts of the plan and you work through it over the 5-year period. We found that has been very effective. So those are just some thoughts in terms of what you need to do to get your chief judge to do what you want your chief judge to do in terms of operating the court.
Thank you, Chief. I would just add under number 1, there's an attachment that goes through what some roles and responsibilities are for you to use as a learning tool for you and your chief judge. We didn't have that when we started. When we started, it was a lot of conversations back and forth. This is the issue that is going on today, Chief. What's your thoughts on it? Or me sharing the issue and he giving me his thoughts on it and then figuring out where we're going to do and who needed to do what. But that chart has been so instrumental now that we can go back and reflect and say, oh, okay, we actually did it intuitively, but to have the chart there, should one of us then decide that we're going to leave the court, we know that that would be a starting place for us. For the support and the visibility, we had 2/3 of our workforce who were able to retire in 2014 when we came in. So not only did we have to deal with the 4 judges who were leaving, we were dealing with the possibility of all this workforce leaving. And we had new people coming in. So we made it a point to reinstitute the Employee of the Month and put some incentives in that. We made it a point to make sure that we had a recognition program for those with years of services. And we had a big event with the presiding judges and certificates and everything like that. Our first year was characterized usually by the chief and myself getting in his car and driving to one of the court campuses, and they saw us as a team. I knew a lot of people from the front of the court side. The chief knew a lot of the people from the civil and the criminal side, so we were able to make those introductions and let everybody know we are here as court leadership, and that was very effective for us. You do have to say what you're going to do, and then you have to follow through with it with action, because people are actually watching. Are you telling the truth, or is anything different this time? We've heard all those lines before, and I can say that we pretty much have lived up to that responsibility. We say what we're going to do, and we follow through. We are fair and objective when it comes to the hiring process. I believe that we should post everything. There are a couple of positions that do not actually go through a testing and things like that, like some of the referees positions, that it may just be requiring that you submit your resume and then you do an interview and a writing sample. But I think that objective hiring process has saved us from so many problems, because nobody knows, what's on the test, or it doesn't make a difference who your relationship is with. Everybody's going through the same process. The master calendar is what we call our calendar that we use. It tells us what's happening each and every month out the year. We know who's responsible to get it done. We know what the due date is. We know if it has to hit our desk. So far, we haven't missed a deadline. And finally, with the strategic plan, I do have a copy of it if you wish to see it. It's also on our website, 3rdcc.org, and it too has definitely helped us guide our business along, and it gets you focused, as they were sharing in the plenary session, on what's really important. You're going to have the fires that you have to deal with day to day, but having the strategic plan, make sure that we actually get done what's really important to our court.
All right. Thank you, Chief and Zanelle. So they've shared some tips with you. How about, I want to go to the case scenario. and have you take a look at that. And then when we're debriefing that here in a few minutes, if you have follow-up questions for them, please ask them. So if you're on the website and you're on the handout materials, this case scenario is on page 9. Again, if you have that. If you don't, I know this is very, very tiny, and I'll give you the cliff notes on it, but here is the scenario. So we're going to spend just 5 or so minutes kind of delving into this situation. So here it is. The court leadership team basically is working well together and has been for 6 months. Most things are going well, but you're beginning to experience some tension and resistance related to several key priorities. You're transitioning to a new case management system, including e-filing. Implementation is not going as well as planned or hoped. Judges and staff are resisting the changes. They're complaining loudly. Does this start to sound familiar, perhaps? Okay. At the same time, you're implementing some effective case management practices aimed at reducing the age of pending cases. You're concerned about the potential upheaval, but you also understand the benefits that'll be gained. And that you need to lead staff through these changes. But you're both very busy and you have very different styles in handling these situations. So I'll give you just a couple of minutes at your neighbor there. Just kind of form two small groups or groups of 2 or 3. So you want to avoid increasing tension, misunderstanding, or conflict between the two of you. So we want you to develop an effective, unified response to addressing the resistance. How will each of you deal with it? How will you handle these situations, and what should you each both do to mitigate the resistance and address this problem that is starting to bubble up? Okay? Go ahead, and how would you handle this? You're an executive team. How do you deal with this? Give you a couple minutes.
Saw James this morning.
They're working out?
Yeah. Jane and I went over and had breakfast in that little restaurant on the first floor.
Okay.
It was $27 for the buffet. I couldn't bring myself to do that, but it's good.
That's a lot for a buffet.
You have to eat a lot.
Jane, you stay here.
Did you eat this morning?
I just had a soy chai. Usually if I drink that, it fills me up. Because I had one yesterday evening and I didn't want dinner. It's probably 1,000 calories.
Oh, we've had the quote forever.
It's some ridiculous amount, I'm sure.
I like the food they had at that cocktail party.
See, I didn't eat any of it.
They had pasta that was very good. They had these little pork sandwich sliders. They had onion rings. I thought it was really good, because I was very annoyed when I had to pay $35 for Jay to go, but then it turned out, okay, well, actually we got to eat. It probably would have cost me more money.
So that was cool. So what time does your flight leave tomorrow?
11:30,
Okay.
and I made arrangements. There's some kind of shuttle, so we're going to leave here about 8:30 in the morning and I like to get to the airport early.
Me too.
And you know what happened on Thursday? Jane was really slow getting ready. We left the house less than 2 hours before our flight.
Really?
We made it, but
Airport
if 94 had any problems at all, we wouldn't have made it. So I was quite annoyed. And but we made it.
We were there 2 hours, probably more like 3 hours in advance.
Yes, you're doing fine, Brenda.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Okay, if you can't show it, you can't show it. Don't worry about it. Yeah. It's a known I have seen it anyways.
Yeah, we were there like 2.5 hours.
One more minute.
Then you had to get the ice, didn't you? Were you on a 737? It was a non-stop, wasn't
It was
it?
a nonstop.
Because we had pretty good seats. And this plane, there was only like about, you came in at the very front of the plane, and you walked through the first class section, which was only about 4 or 5 rows. And then the next section was...
Okay. Let's see what you came up with. So applying some of the things that we've talked about and perhaps some of the tips, what are some things that you would do here now to be an effective, high-performance executive leadership team? Anybody who has an idea of what you'd do? Come on. This is your chance. Communicate. Communicate. Here, Robin, we have one up here.
Sorry.
All right. What would you do?
Well, the chief judge and administrator would have to come up with a common goal for that communication. So they'd have to collaborate, and then the chief judge would be working with the judges on implementing, and then the administrator with the staff.
Okay, so you divvy up the roles. You'd have a common message and then have really clear, this is what you're going to do, this is what I'm going to do. Excellent. Other ideas? Here we go, Ray.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
We discussed that you would find the interest or the likes of the other team members or the higher or the judges and find out what perks their interest and kind of go towards that. And one could be devices, one could be social issues. You just find out what they like and want.
Okay, good. That's driving at needs and interests, isn't it? Rather than always problem-centered. Excellent. Here we go.
And one of the things we're talking about is how the tension or misunderstandings may not necessarily be issue-driven. So we want to make sure that we open up the communication entirely to all and any subject, not just isolated to case flow changes or case management system changes.
Great. Okay. One more suggestion that came out of your small group discussions. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Dawn.
Hi. One of the items we talked about is that it's important to communicate broadly, right? Acknowledge perception and reality of whatever the issues are before you start solving any of the issues, right? Because sometimes it's lack of information that allows tensions to build up or conclusions to be drawn that aren't so. So acknowledging that there's some opportunity to do that is key.
Excellent. Those are all great suggestions. At the heart of what everybody said is communication. Right? It's communicate. It's being bold. It's taking the risk to sit down and have that conversation, really clear, frank, candid conversation as an executive team so that you can then address the issues, anticipate perceptions, listen to what people are saying, and to be able to respond in an effective way. Excellent. Well, I know you have other good ideas for how to address this situation. I think in the interest of time, we will keep going on. Want to point out as we get ready to segue to our part 2 of today's session. Dawn, do you want to mention this?
So this is in your handout, and I just wonder, in Michigan, we have a court rule that talks about the chief judge role. Do most of you have that as well? So it's been there forever. We actually have a slideshow that walks through the different court rule pieces. Doesn't that sound lawyerly? Let's just look at the law. So Brenda comes to Michigan and thinks about this and designed this for us. I mean, years, decades have gone by. Why we didn't think of this as a conversation tool. Whether it's an experienced chief judge or a brand new chief judge, as a court manager, wouldn't you love to have a neutral sort of walk through and ask those hard questions that you'd like that new leader or experienced leader to consider? And I thought it was great that you thought when there is a team that the judge would deal with their judicial colleagues. In Michigan, that's actually a question. Some judges don't respond to a colleague who's now in that chief judge role the way you would hope they would. It's like, you're not the boss of me. So you have to use some different roles. Judge Colombo can talk about that, I think. So I think it's great to have that conversation with your other team member, here's what I'm strong at, here's what makes sense. But the way that Brenda had put that checklist together, if you have a court role, perhaps you could do the same thing in sort of a facilitated guide to be very clear about, here's the responsibilities, what should you be expecting me to do, what can I hope and expect you to do. So.
If you have been in your current executive team role positions for a while, let's say you've been with the presiding judge for a couple of years, if nothing else, it's just a quick go through and are we still on the same page? So it still could be in a helpful conversation. Or if conflict starts to emerge, again, it's a tool that you can use. All right. Does anybody have any questions for the chief or Zanelle on the tips from building a collaborative team and how they work together to address the challenges of the court? Okay, Kevin?
Judge, I was wondering, as you described your court as a large court, multiple campuses, lots of different dockets, 58 judges, I'm assuming you would suggest that the same kind of tips or techniques would work in any size court, that it's not just appropriate for a large urban court, but this could also work just as effectively in smaller operations. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. And it would also work not only for small operations, but it works for the presiding judges of our division, because I can't run the court by myself. It's too big, it's too complex. I would be lost without my presiding judges, as well as our deputy court administrators and other managers who help us. But these really apply, these things that we've talked about really apply to everyone to be effective managers.
Okay. Scalable, right? That's what we're talking. If we can scale down to a smaller jurisdiction, scaled up to larger. All right, let's switch gears now. So we're going to assume you've had the tough conversations, you've built the strong relationships, and you have an effective leadership team. So how do you then leverage those relationships with partners and stakeholders? So I want to share this quickly, this model with you. So my challenge to you is to consider kind of how you communicate with your partners and see if you can't elevate it on more and more issues and get to collaboration. So Dawn mentioned communication. That's the foundational piece, not only with an executive team, but also then as you're extending your communication out to your various partners and stakeholders. The second level is cooperation. You know, that's a willingness to help out. Yeah, we'll cooperate with you on that. The third level is coordination. Takes it up a little bit more. Okay, we'll coordinate. We'll do some things a little bit differently or in sync with you. So you're showing a little more willingness to be a good partner. The fourth level really takes it to the next level. It's the 3 C's on steroids, if you will. And collaboration, if you look at true collaboration, it's a mutually beneficial relationships where parties put down their own parochial interests and they rise above to the greater good. So you might go to the table with your partners needing X, Y, and Z, but if you truly get to collaboration, you set aside X, Y, and Z, you listen, you embark on the conversation and dialogue, and you come up with an answer which might be A, B, or C, but embedded in it might likely be X, Y, and Z. So I know some of you, or I'm hoping some of you are thinking about examples that you've already experienced where you have gotten to the level of true collaboration. This takes a lot of hard work. I think we stop short too often. Okay, well, we're coordinating or we're cooperating. That's good, but take it to the next level. Just quickly, here are some keys to successful collaboration from some research in a public kind of civic environment. And you can see here, these are all extremely important. Urgency and purpose. There has to be a reason to bring people together to truly collaborate. I'm going to jump around here. Credible and open process. If you're going to overcome mistrust and skepticism, you have to have a credible and open process, one where you're willing to sit down and listen and learn. and problem solve, not just hammer home, what you need or want. Anyway, you can tell if true collaboration has occurred when number 10 occurs. When a profound shift occurs in the meetings that you're running, where you rise above and you come up with perhaps a totally different solution that meets more and more needs. So I'm going to stop here. I'm happy to address more of these later. But let's take a quick look at scenario 2. And that 2 is in the materials that are on page 9. It's on the materials if you're following along. Here's the scenario in very small print if you don't have access to that, so I'll just review it quickly. You have excellent relationships with most of your community and justice system partners and stakeholders. You've worked hard to establish the mutual respect, open communication, and a cooperative environment. However, you, the court's leadership team, are now facing a very challenging situation. You must advocate for the court's interests and needs related to new facilities. What's being proposed is unacceptable. It won't meet the court's current needs or future needs. It'll be less accessible to the people that you serve. The proposed location and layout will impact community and justice system partners. So you're kind of in a bind. Doesn't meet your needs. You've got a cooperative spirit, so how do you now raise this to the level of collaboration? Here's what we'd like you to talk among your pairs there. How will each member of the executive team address this situation? What strategies will you use? Mostly, how will you maintain a spirit of collaboration while advocating for the court's needs? All right, we'll give you a couple minutes to noodle on this situation, and then we're going to hear from our expert panel. How do you deal with this? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, you take this one. We thought would be best suited because of the criminal court guy.
Why don't you plop that in her ear?
Not to plan a way to respond, but we had to brief us on the, she did this in the Lansing last week. We talked about the situation. Had a moment, we had to grieve the fact they didn't come with their ideas. They built the building, or they developed the building plans without you. And how you approached your process of good government, which I thought was such a strategic. I was going to object to it.
Okay. Before we hear from you, we're going to hear from our expert panelists here, folks who have actually dealt with the situation like this before. So these are the proven strategies that they've used, they're going to talk about, and then we'll hear what else you would add to it from your small discussions.
So dealing with scenario 2, changing names and everything like that to protect the innocent. The first thing that we did, first of all, we were appalled that you sent us this plan that didn't consider what our needs were. We had a courthouse that had 28 courtrooms with jury rooms. You sent us a plan for 24 courtrooms with 19 jury rooms. Where did you get this from? But that was all internally. And then so we then identified who should be the team handling this. And the chief judge didn't handle it. He actually delegated it to our presiding judge in criminal. And a lot of the work was done by the deputy court administrator over in that division because they were very familiar with the building and what the partners in that building would need to actually have a good building that worked for them. We went to the meeting with the county, and our position was, you're looking for good government. We're part of government. We're the third branch, not a department, but we're part of government. Let's sit down and really take a look at what this would mean as far as building a facility. We've had some people weigh in, some of the partners, such as the sheriff, weigh in as far as the security outlay, and we have some suggested changes there. We know what our traffic is as far as courtrooms, as far as jury usage. We know what we need to have improved there. So we want to bring this to you. We realize that you have a budget, but we do want to make sure that we have a voice. And we want to make sure that this building that you're going to give us for the next 50, 60 years will actually serve what we need it to do. So there was a lot of conversation back and forth there. And we're continuing those conversations, but it's centered around not looking at just what the court would want, because there's some things we would really, really, really want. There's some things that we know that we can deal without. So we're coming to the common ground around that. And we also hired our own consultant who was very knowledgeable about court structures. So we're not going at the table and just pulling stuff out of a hat. They're looking at how you have people egressing and ingressing, the security for the judges coming through the parking lot and things like that. So coming equipped with the data and statistics has helped us. Choosing the right people to have at the table has been very helpful. And just having this overarching theme that we're looking for good government and for the 3 branches of government to actually work effectively.
Okay. Chief, do you want to add?
I think that said it all.
Okay, so what additional ideas did you come up with? So Zanel expressed how they've handled it in a similar situation, not exact, but they spent a lot of time building relationships with all those partners outside of just around the facilities, didn't you? Yes. I mean, you invest a lot of time going to various events and establishing and building those relationships. What other ideas did you have from your discussion? Oh, there we go. Thank you, sir.
You know, we're struggling. We have a new criminal tower being built. We're in Lake County, Illinois.
Okay.
But they are shelling, 2 floors, and we're trying to get them to build out at least one, because basically they're building a new court tower but not giving us any additional courtrooms. And so it's a struggle. But one of the things I think it's hard for the funding agency, we tell them we want this kind of car, we want it to look like this with these kind of features, but you can't tell us what to do with it. And it's very hard for a funding agency to say, well, I've got to answer to the people for why their taxes are going up and doing all this, and you won't tell me why you want it to look that way. And telling me you don't have any control. And that's the hard part for the elected officials from on the legislative side to understand a lot of times, that the independence is, yes, we recognize your responsibility in being responsible to the taxpayer for the monies, but so are we. And it's developing that they always want to have some efficiency. They want to look at,
Right.
well, how are we efficiently spending our money?
Right.
And that's a difficult thing.
So I know that you've addressed this. I mean, you are well aware of the efficiency need and the needs of the court, and you're aware of and sensitive to the fiscal matters. So how have you overcome, or how do you address some of that?
A lot of it was done by hiring the consultant who was familiar with, what courthouses need to look like. Some of it was the data. We could tell you the number of jurors, where our high peak days were, and things like that. One of the things that was proposed is that our jury room actually double as a conference center, and it can't happen. We have trials 5 days a week, except for like Fridays. Most Fridays we don't. So it's not like your conferences, everybody in this complex is going to have everything just going on Fridays. It's not reasonable. A lot of it took sitting down and sometimes even bringing different partners to the table, having them observe our operations, because we had them actually say, oh, we didn't realize that. Or you're taking a model from another project that you had in a different jurisdiction that is not a large urban court. So there's a lot of conversations to be had, a lot of different ways to have it, and I think it's very helpful if all the conversations are not just happening at the table where everybody's under the gun. That if you start doing some of that in informal ways, you can actually start sharing the ideas and letting them know everything may not look to you from your perspective that we're doing it efficiently, but we are about doing good government, and this is how we have been doing it on our side as far as the judiciary.
Okay. One other thought that came out of your small group discussion. Does anybody else have something different that you want to share? There we go.
Thank you. Just something to add. It sounds like the relationships that had existed between the county partners or justice partner agencies and the courts seem to be very good. And this project, let's say, seemed to have quite a bit of inertia going forward, and you need to have some really good facts and figures to slow this thing down or turn it around. So making sure that collectively within the judicial branch, there's a lot of information to back up some of the reasons for maybe relocating it or what have you, or maybe changing the scale, is going to be very, very important. And something that was just mentioned is this facility is going to be here for 50 to 75 years. Don't make a mistake right now that you're going to be paying for 10 years from now. So, if you can demonstrate that making a decision, a smart decision early on and avoid problems later, it can be reversed, but you can't reverse it unless you have a lot of facts and figures to back it up, because perhaps a lot of money has already been spent. So making a good decision requires good information, maintaining those good relationships, serving the community in addition to the courts is an important commitment that shouldn't be overlooked.
Excellent. Very, very, very good points. The data, and I guess in closing, I want to just underscore the importance of those relationships. And Zanelle, you mentioned it, you did as well. You don't start building the relationships on an issue like this when you have a problem. You build those, you make investments, and you put it in the bank, right? And you're building trust, mutual respect, you're learning, listening, and then when you reach a tough issue like this is when you start pulling out those deposits. Okay, just in closing, we're not going to look at this video because time is up, but I encourage you, the link is in the materials. It's 3 minutes, 44 seconds. It's an example of true collaboration taking place in Wayne County with the William Booth Legal Aid Clinic. It's well worth a look when you have time. I would just like to thank Judge Colombo and Zanelle and Dawn and you all for both attending and participating today. We hope you're walking away with some reminders, some refreshers of what maybe you're already doing great, and then some tools and tips that can help you improve going forward. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.